Have you ever wondered how much Japanese you actually have to know? It can get very overwhelming, When I first started studying Japanese, and if you want to learn all about that and my journey, you can watch this video over here. But I was obsessed with learning as many words as I could, with learning all the kanji, all the grammar, like all of that kind of stuff, I had all the textbooks, and I wanted to get the JLPT N2 at first because it's very useful for when you're looking for work. And then I got the N1 because I saw that many jobs were advertising, they wanted N1 level proficiency. So I studied for that and I got it. And I got both of those tests on the first go. It took a lot of study, but it's possible, it's doable. I'm not like a rocket scientist or anything like that, but I did put in a lot of time into my studies. But looking back, or just looking at my situation now and living in Japan now for 13 years, I'm I sometimes question how much Japanese is actually required. And of course, it's great to have N1 because it opens up those career doors, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not like a 100% must kind of a requirement unless you're, trying to get into a job where it's like, translation or whatever. You obviously have to prove that you know the language, and the JLPT still remains to this day one of the easiest ways or most accepted ways of showing, how much Japanese you know. And the argument stands. A lot of people will tell you, or you may be one of those people who says that the N1 includes Japanese that you never use. So what's the point? It's just a waste of time, and that you're better off just studying actual Japanese. And that's true. That is true. There's a lot of stuff in there that you'll never use. But occasionally, things pop up. Years later, you'll see a movie and someone will use an expression that you learnt in N1 study, or you'll be doing a translation one day and something will come up and you'll go, oh, I remember studying that. People who say that you don't need it or that it's ridiculous, you shouldn't even bother with the N1. Well, if it's that trivial, just get it. If it's going to help you out with finding work, and it does, I don't care what people say, it really does help you find work. It'll get you the interviews, but in saying that, the N2 will also do that for you. So I would say, if you're overwhelmed by the content of the N1, just go for the N2, because the N2 will open up many, many doors for you. It's not easy to get. The jump between N3 and N2 is quite large, in my opinion, and having N2 will show potential employers that you are very, very serious and that you know a lot of Japanese and that you've put in a lot of hours, and it also demonstrates your dedication, I suppose. It's not just about that test score or the certificate. It shows that you're serious and that you can put in the effort when required, and that in itself is a great thing for an employer to know about your character, is that you can put your mind to something and do it. And so that's something they like to see as well. But in terms of everyday fluency, it's really interesting, you actually don't need a lot to get by in Japan if you're just looking at surviving and socializing. You don't need that much. And I've seen a couple of interesting discussions and arguments online about how knowing less Japanese can actually work in your favor in social situations. And some of that might be true. My experience is very anecdotal with that, but it is true to a point. I can see where people get that, because when you don't speak as much Japanese, people find that kind of interesting and novel, and they want to ask you a lot of questions, and that in itself, like you not being able to speak Japanese, opens up an opportunity for people to ask you questions and have fun and enjoy the conversation. So in a sense, that's true, but you'll have certain moments where you'll be like, I wish I could understand what they just said, or I wish I got that joke because they're laughing and I'm not. There'll be moments like that, and it is obviously better, in my opinion, to understand the language to a certain degree. But what is that degree? I would say, as someone who used to stress a lot about it, I would say that you don't need to stress too much about it. Learn the fundamentals, like really put in the hours and the effort to learn the fundamentals. You really got to know things like, counting and days of the week and greetings. And I would say, look at the building blocks of language. If you don't know about language in terms of, the technical side of language, it's learn about that first in your own language. Learn about how language is formed. Learn about the blocks. And when I say blocks, like I'm not like a linguistics professor or anything like that, but know the basic blocks. Know what verbs are, what nouns are, adjectives, adverbs, all that kind of stuff. Learn what they are, and learn or understand that nouns are probably one of the most important building blocks of a language, because nouns are things. So this is a hand, on the hand is a glove. These are all nouns, obviously. I know you guys know all this, but I'm just saying it for the sake of the discussion. And nouns are like what babies say first, right? Like mama is a noun. Food is a noun. All of the stuff that they point at, babies point at stuff first and then they say stuff. So nouns are very important, obviously. Know your nouns. Pull out like a piece of paper and write down all of the key nouns that you use throughout your daily life. It's different for everyone. Some people might say coffee every 5 seconds, like me. So write down coffee and figure out how to say it in Japanese. Write down a list of all the English words that you use on a daily basis, and then, put a column next to it and write down what the Japanese equivalent is. And slowly build your vocab. Start with the nouns, I'd say. This is for memorization. Obviously, there are other things that you need to do to improve your fluency and stuff, but I'm starting off with just the memorization or the learning of these building blocks, which I think is actually really important, But I would suggest learning both the words that I'm talking about now and the grammatical expressions and rules and things in parallel at the same time. So you can slowly incorporate words from your lists into those patterns, into those grammatical patterns and rules and things. So you can make use of those and slowly develop fluency. When I say fluency, I'm really talking about becoming comfortable. For me, it's kind of like a muscle memory thing. You know how when you drive a car or something like that, or you learn how to ride a bicycle, it feels really awkward at first. And it's the same with when you learn a new grammar point in Japanese. It just sounds totally off, and you sound really weird. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes, and then you realize that it becomes like a reaction to a certain situation. And I have a video, actually, I'll put that up here, about how certain words become like a reflex in Japanese. Things like ouch or oh, that's hot, or stuff like that. And they become a reflex. And that's because you say them so often and because you hear them so often. So the more often you say stuff and do stuff, these things become second nature and habitual. So I recommend doing those in tandem. Practice your grammar structures, and then as you improve your words or increase the number of words that you know, start incorporating them into those structures and make sentences until you start feeling comfortable with them. But so I'm kind of going all over the place with this, but this is how I am on this channel. I just love speaking my mind and whatever's in there. There's a lot of stuff that I do want to talk about and share with you guys about language and life here. With the how much do you need to know, it's really not much. There's a really interesting theory out there, or law. I think it's technically a law. It's Ziff's law, I think it's called. ZIPF. And, I mean, sorry if I get this wrong. I'm not, gonna... you can look up the Wikipedia link for it. I'll put it down below in the notes. But basically, it says something like a small number of words make up the majority of the language. I know that sounds like it doesn't make sense, but it's in terms of frequency and how much words are used and how important those words are. So, for example, the word water is just one word, but it makes up a lot of, in terms of frequency or percentage of the words that are being spoken in a day. It probably holds a larger share than, say, the word semiconductor, So knowing water, you could argue, is more important than knowing the word semiconductor, or it's going to be more useful to you. So you really only need to know a certain number of words and verbs and things to be able to convey most of what you want to say. And so I would suggest, there's a book that I mentioned in another video called 600 Verbs, I'll put the title in the book up here as well. But that was one of the key books in my learning. It really unlocked how verbs are formed and how they're used in Japanese. And so I would suggest, I mentioned earlier that nouns are very important. I would argue that verbs are equally as important, if not more important. The more you go into learning the language, it's probably even more important to understand how verbs work in Japanese. Verbs have a lot of functions in Japanese. In English, they're limited to just because they're action words. Running, walking, all that stuff they're all verbs, doing words, doing things. And in Japanese, the form of a verb can actually tell you a lot more than just the action. It can tell you who's doing the action. A lot of you who are beginner or intermediate might have already realized or noticed that there's a severe lack of subjects in Japanese speech or language. So in English, we're constantly saying, like, I'm, you are. So we're always specifying who it is. I'm hot. In Japanese, you don't really say I'm. You just say hot. And then with the verbs, it's the same. You don't really say, like, I am doing blah, blah, blah every single time, And so the verb form can sometimes, or often, it can tell you who is doing the action or, what's going on. It gives you a lot of context. So there are things called, there's passive forms. Passive form is something that I love in Japanese. It tells you a lot, and understanding that, getting your head around that, really unlocks a lot of the issues that we face as English speakers trying to learn Japanese, is unlocking or understanding the passive form and the difference between transitive and intransitive verbs, which someone actually brought up on one of my old videos the other day. And thanks for reminding me, by the way, if you're watching this one by any chance. I do really want to put together a little list of not really traps, but little challenges, hurdles that we face as English speakers trying to learn Japanese. And I'd love to just put together a little summary and maybe a little 5 or 10 minute video that introduces those, so that you can have a reference for, looking those things up or giving you a refresher about those whenever you need to, go back to what the important or the difficult points are in Japanese language that we often face as English speakers. So that's about it, I guess. I just really wanted to emphasize in this video that, you shouldn't worry too much about becoming perfect in Japanese. It can really be bad for you in many ways to be obsessed with perfection. And so I really want you to just be happy and comfortable with knowing the basics first. And it takes time. Slowly develop it and slowly improve. Keep some notebooks or Excel spreadsheets and just add words to it, as you get better and better at the language and slowly improve. It really is like exercising a muscle. It's really like going to the gym and just slowly improving and slowly adding weights. What is that? There's an election or something going on. There's a little car, I don't know if you can see that, with speakers on it. That's the TV tower, by the way, here in Nagoya City. It used to be just called the Nagoya TV Tower. It's now called the Mirai, I think it's called the Mirai something or other TV tower now. I think it's because Chubu Electricity bought it or sponsored it or something, so they had to change the name. But everyone still calls it the Nagoya TV Tower, to be honest. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, that's about it for today's video. I really don't know what else to add. So yeah, that's it. So we're at the end of the video, and that means it's time for Word of the Day. And today's word of the day, I actually haven't really thought about this too much yet. I'm out, as you can see, just cycling and riding around the place. And I brought my camera with me, and I thought if I feel inspired and I feel like talking, I might just try doing one of these videos out in the park like this. And it worked out well. And I think one of the reasons why I'm able to speak so much is because I just had a double shot espresso from a beautiful coffee shop around the corner from here called QOL Coffee. First time I went there today, and it was absolutely fantastic. So that double shot of espresso, I think, really got me going. I haven't even had breakfast, and I'm able to produce this much energy, so it's a good thing. So today's word of the day, I'm just trying to think. Okay, I've got it. Today's word of the day is going to be kaitaku, and kaitaku is a word which came to mind because I'm trying to find new coffee shops and just get out there and, drink coffee at different places and enjoy exploring the area. So kaitaku is kind of like the process of finding new things. In business, sometimes they use it when you're cultivating new clients or building new clients, and you're exploring, I suppose, is another way you could put it. But that's today's word of the day, kaitaku. So I've been doing a bit of kaitakuing, looking for new coffee joints and things like that, and I'm really enjoying the process. So today was QOL Coffee, and I think I'll go there again. It was really nice. I want to try one of their drip coffees next, and we'll see how that goes. I'll let you guys know. Anyway, that's all from me for today. If you want to support the channel and you like this one, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share the video with your friends if you have anyone in your friend circle who is interested in Japan or Japanese language or that kind of stuff. All right, I'll see you at the next video. Bye for now.